Hey Optimancers, Chris here. So last week I promised that this week I would be doing a Warlock build video, and I said number one that I would be doing straight Warlock, and number two that I would not be using Hexblade. So this is that video. Now the build I'm going to be showing you today is actually a concept and a build might not be exactly the same as it was, but it is a build I have played before, and I'll say it is a ton of fun. Now, there's a few things I should mention about this build. First off, this build will be able to effectively contribute to combat, but it's not really built for combat. It is more built for utility, and when combats occur, you'll feel like you are contributing, but it is not going to be the best combat build I could make for Warlock, by far. Number two, I should mention that the defense of this build is not particularly strong. This is a build that you need to play like you're playing a squishy wizard. You're going to have to be back in combat and try to protect yourself with cover or just making yourself not really a target in combat. When it comes to offense, it does fine, but defense, it's a little on the weak side. And number three, I should mention that this is a build that works a lot better if the campaign is going to start at second level or higher. At first level, this falls together pretty weakly, and it really kind of comes into its own at second level, and then it continues on from there. Now, when we talk about Warlocks, we talk about patrons, and today I need to be thanking my patrons. So, I have a Patreon, the link is in the video description down below, but today I want to call out some of my top level patrons who really help this channel out, and I would like to thank specifically Sean Bauer, TUM, Takusin, Thomas Barrero, Geek Dice, Jay Gemmel, Joseph Robideau, and Michael Troy. Thank you all so much for your support. So let's make a Warlock. So the Warlock we're going to be making today is the Voice from Beyond. This is a character concept that I have played before, and it is an absolute hoot to play, and in order to play it, you have to be a Warlock of the Great Old One. So with the Great Old One, your patron is a mysterious entity whose nature is utterly foreign to the fabric of reality, might have come from the far realm, or the space beyond reality, or it could be one of the elder gods known only in legends. Its motives are incomprehensible to mortals, and its knowledge so immense and ancient that even the greatest libraries pale in comparison to the vast secrets it holds. The Great Old One might be unaware of your existence, or entirely indifferent to you, but the secrets you have learned allow you to draw magic from it. So when I pick a patron for the Great Old One for this character concept, I have a lot of options, but one way or another. I want my patron to be alien. I want my patron to be black and slimy and full of tentacles. And I want it to breed insanity. This really fits the concept for the Voice from Beyond. So let's look at how this character is built at second level, and then I'm going to kind of explain how the concept works. So the first thing is, for this character, we don't need any homebrew content or critical role. There's no campaign-specific stuff. It's completely legal for Adventurers League. We don't need multi-classing. This is a character that should be allowed in pretty much any campaign. Now, when I played this character, I used Variant Human, and you'll see why in a second. But if you are using Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, you could use the new Custom Lineage option. In fact, I think the new Custom Lineage option could work extremely well for this. Simply because there is mystery in this character, and the idea of having a race that's pretty ambiguous actually works with this concept really well. But when I played it, I used Variant Human, and Variant Human worked just fine. Now when we choose a language for this character, what we want to be doing is choosing languages where we are picking races that are also medium-sized. Now beyond that, we are pretty wide open, but I think that picking the most common races is probably a good way to go. So let's start with Elvish. Next, we do our ability score increase, and you're going to double take here, but nevertheless, trust me, the ability score increases we're going to take here are Constitution and Dexterity. So it is true, we are not taking Charisma here. Now, if I was to be using the custom lineage from Tasha's, I would absolutely pick Charisma as my +2 bonus, and you'll see why in a moment. And Perception is the skill I'm going to choose. I think it is usually the best skill we're going to get for a human. I think in this case it is as well. And then we get our bonus feat for Variant Human, and this is the reason we're playing a Variant Human, because we want this feat as soon as possible. And the feat we're going to select is Actor. Now, Actor increases our Charisma score by 1 to a maximum of 20. That's why we're not selecting it with our Variant Human ability score increases, because we can get the Charisma score of 16 without them. And by picking Constitution and Dexterity, it means we could have 16 in all of them. It is also going to give us advantage on Charisma Deception and Charisma Performance checks when trying to pass yourself off as a different person. This is huge to this build, but the biggest thing of this build is actually the last feature. You can mimic the speech of another person or sounds made by other creatures. You must have heard the person speaking or heard the creature make a sound for at least 1 minute. A successful Wisdom Insight check contested by your Charisma Deception check allows the listener to determine the effect is faked, so we want our Charisma Deception score to be really good. So if I was doing the custom lineage, I'd put the +2 in Charisma and take the Actor feat, and then I could actually start with a Charisma score of 18, and I'd do that in a second. But because we are using Variant Human, 16 is the best we're going to get. Then we're going to choose our class. We're going to choose Warlock, and I'm going to put it 2nd level because I want to show you, again, when this character comes together. At 1st level, it's just more of a standard Warlock. 2nd level is when this becomes a fun build. So now we're going to select our proficiencies for Warlock, and the proficiencies we're going to select, number 1, Deception. This is the most important skill for this character. And number 2, we're going to pick Intimidation. We're going to be strong with Charisma, we're going to be strong with social skills with this character, and this character is somewhat intimidating. And the other worldly patron we'll be selecting is the Great Old One. The important thing about the patron is the theme. The theme is that this is an alien power with an alien intelligence, insane by any standards that we as human beings in our world would attribute to it, and whatever it has done to the mind of our character has made our character unfathomable to the rest of the party and the rest of the world. Then we're going to choose our Eldritch Invocations. Now I have played this build, and the first time I played this build, I took 2 invocations here that I'm not going to recommend this time, because the one thing I found is I really regretted my choices. Because I didn't take Agonizing Blast, and I think you kind of need to take Agonizing Blast with this character if you're going to be effective in combat. If you're not going to be effective in combat, combats happen in D&D and it's going to suck. Now I took Misty Visions instead of Agonizing Blast, and what I figured is I'm going to be using Silent Image in order to affect combats, and I could do that for maybe a turn, but then what do you do on the following turn? And that's when things get difficult. So I do think we're better off taking Agonizing Blast. It just gives us something we can do in combat that we know is going to be reasonably effective, and we're not going to have the Silent Image right away, but we'll get it eventually. But the most important invocation for the concept of this character is Mask of Many Faces. So we'll be selecting that at 2nd level, and that brings the concept to life. The thing that the Great Old One patron gives us at 1st level is called Awakened Mind. Starting at 1st level, your alien knowledge gives you the ability to touch the minds of other creatures. You can speak telepathically to any creature you can see within 30 feet of you. You don't need to share a language with the creature for it to understand your telepathic utterances, but the creature must be able to understand at least 1 language. There's a few great things about this. Number 1, it doesn't limit you to 1 creature at a time. Number 2, there's no way for them to know who it is who's communicating with them. Now it is one way, so you're only telepathically contacting them, but it is a great and creepy way to interact with your party and NPCs. Awakened Mind does not use your bonus action or your action. It is basically free to use. Then we're going to add our spells, and for cantrips, this is going to be an Eldritch Blast build. And I should make it clear that when I say this character is using Eldritch Blast, I do not mean this character is raising their palm and a beam of purple light flies out of their hand. That's not what this character is going to be doing. The first thing that's going to happen is the enemies are going to be hearing the verbal components.
At long last, the broken tome of the frustrating, accidentally earth-threatening myth was revealed. The darkness about to mark eagerly cooked and ate the flesh of the ritual.
But they won't know where those verbal components are coming from because this character's jaw is going to drop an unreasonable level and a gigantic black tentacle is going to come out of their mouth and extend out and start slapping around the enemies. We want this to be creepy as hell. The other spell I want to pick for cantrips is Minor Illusion. There's actually lots of cantrips I'd love to have for this character, but Minor Illusion I think is the most important selection. It gives us the ability to have creatures see something that's not there. It has the ability to have creatures hear something that's not there. And with this concept, these are going to be flavorful and effective things we can do. When it comes to our first level spells, there's two obvious selections as far as I'm concerned. Number one is Dissonant Whispers. This is one that is Great Old One patron only, and it is a really nice spell, and it fits immaculately with our concept. It does not use concentration, and what it is going to do is we're going to cast it on a creature. They make a saving throw. If they fail, they're going to take psychic damage. The damage is not bad, and it must use its reaction to immediately move as far away as their speed allows. This provokes attacks of opportunity from our allies. This can really affect the tactics of a battlefield, and removing a reaction of a creature can also be incredibly important and useful. And the idea of whispering something in the ear of an enemy that freaks them out fits the concept of this character. Next spell I'm going to take is Hex. Again, this is going to help us be effective in combat. It lasts a long time, so we don't need to cast it very often, which is good because as a Warlock with pack slots, we have very limited casting. And it also does affect ability checks, and this is important also for the concept of this build, because when we're not in combat, Hex is going to be a great way to debuff the insight of people we interact with. And that is going to be as good as having advantage with our deception checks. So for our ability scores, I'm going to use a point buy, and we're only going to increase 3 ability scores. I'm going to increase my charisma score to 15. With the actor feat, that's going to become a 16. Then I'm going to increase my constitution to 15. That's going to become a 16 with our racial modifier, and the same thing with our dexterity. So our ability scores are going to be very focused. Dexterity, constitution, charisma. For my background, I'm going to choose Urchin. It's going to give me skills proficiencies in sleight of hand and stealth. Remember, I've got a 16 dexterity. I do not have medium or heavy armor, so I'm going to have no disadvantage on stealth checks. So actually, this character is going to be pretty good at stealth. Sleight of hand also got a good dexterity. This is a trickery character. Sleight of hand fits as well, and it's a skill we're probably going to get some use out of. For tool proficiencies, we're going to get Disguise Kit and Thieves Tools. Now, Disguise Kit might sound like it's useless, but it's not. Disguise Kit is going to be something we can use to disguise the rest of the party, even though they won't be disguised nearly as well as we will. And Thieves Tools, when we're talking about an espionage character, is also very useful. Now, it is tempting and not a terrible idea if you want to choose a background that's going to give you languages. We could choose some languages that give us even more ability to impersonate other creatures, though eventually we are going to take a spell that is going to replace all of that. So I think if we're thinking in the long term, this is the better way to go. With our starting equipment, we're going to choose a light crossbow and 20 bolts, and I will mention that at level 1, the light crossbow is definitely going to be better than Eldritch Blast for you. Then we're going to choose a component pouch or an arcane focus. I'm going to take a component pouch, but feel free to take an arcane focus, makes no difference. Then I'm going to pick a Dungeoneer's pack, gives me the kind of equipment I'm going to need for adventuring. Then we're going to get leather armor, any simple weapon. I'm just choosing a dagger, and then we're getting 2 more daggers. So we're going to get 3 daggers. If anybody in your party needs any kind of simple weapon, grab that for them and just give it to them. So this is the character at second level. We're going to be using our Eldritch Blast in combat most of the time. It's +5 to hit, d10 plus 3 damage. That's fine, but we can add the Hex spell to it, so it'll be a d10 plus a d6 plus 3 in combat, and that is perfectly adequate. It is not especially powerful, but it is definitely enough that you can contribute in combat, and you're not going to feel like you're not effectively contributing. The armor class here is 14, assuming we can get studded leather. That's easy enough to get to 15. That's not a great armor class. That is a stand in the back armor class. But Eldritch Blast has a range of 120 feet. There is no reason you need to get close. This is not a melee character. And if we do get hit, at least we have a decent number of hit points. 19 for level 2 is not bad at all. But again, ideally, this character is not going to get hit a lot in combat. They're not a frontliner. They are the reason why we have tanks, so to protect characters like ours. If we look at our skills, we can see Deception +5, Intimidation +5, Sleight of Hand +5, Stealth +5. Remember, we took the actor feat with this character, and it allows us to mimic the sounds of other people or other creatures. And we took Mask of Many Faces, which is going to give us Disguise Self at will. Disguise Self does not use our concentration, and it has a long duration, a duration of 1 hour. This allows us to make ourselves, including our clothing, armor, and weapons, and other belongings, look different until the spell ends, or until we use our action to dismiss it. We are never dismissing Disguise Self with this character. If we are getting rid of a Disguise Self, it is because we're casting it again to take on a different look. So the Voice from Beyond, this is how it works. We will always have Disguise Self up, and there is no reason why you need to tell the rest of the players what your race is, what your gender is, what your name is, what your voice sounds like, because the other PCs will never know. The only time, presumably, that you'll ever have your natural form is when you're huddled up in a bedroll with the covers over your head. You go to bed at night and you appear to be an elf in elven chain, and you wake up the next morning and suddenly you are a dwarf in heavy plate armor. And your name constantly changes, your voice constantly changes, your manner of speaking constantly changes. The only thing that remains the same with the Voice from Beyond is the disturbing messages that the other PCs and the NPCs are consistently getting in their mind.
You watch in horror, like an accurately forming unfamiliar with the ocean. You hesitantly dance with the brain, but others secreted away from the awful knowledge of a forgotten spirit. Remembering the opulent symmetry of a putrid rock, you prostrate yourself before the horror of a symbol that stood before you. It existed inside a speech of dreams. Oh, the earth-threatening annihilation of it all.
So this character becomes the perfect infiltration character. They need to study someone for 1 minute, then they can perfectly replicate their appearance, their equipment, and their voice. And with the level of deception we have, we can imitate their mannerisms as well. Now, I will say one thing about this build is if your DM uses performance checks, I'm used to playing with DMs that never call for performance checks. But if your DM uses performance checks, then I would alter the background of this character. I'd give up sleight of hand and switch it for performance. Because this is what this character is centered around. You enter the castle, appearing as one of the guards. After you enter the castle, suddenly you are one of the chambermaids. Moving to the king's bedroom, you are now the king's son. After you dispose of the king, you are the king. And all these changes, all these disguises, are almost indecipherable to anyone but you. And remember, this is never using concentration. We never have to worry about running out of spell slots. This can be done all day, every day. And with this character, I used it all the time. So my character would show up in the morning with one appearance and one name, and any time they separated from the rest of the party, they'd come back and it'd be something different. Sometimes perfectly imitating other PCs, just to freak them out. In combat, I found that the best tactic was actually to present yourself as something that would be not typically the number one choice for a target. So maybe something like a heavily armored dwarven forge cleric. The enemy sees the heavily armored dwarven forge cleric hanging out in the back. This is not somebody who they are going to go out of their way to target with attacks. So this creates a defense that isn't necessarily mechanical. It's more intuitive, but it does affect gameplay. And with this character, you should be changing your race. You should be changing your equipment. You should be changing your appearance, your voice, your gender, all the time so that nobody ever knows what your character really is. And kind of the concept I went with is the character probably didn't even know what they were. These things were long forgotten for this character once they made a pact with an insane alien power. So I'm going to hop 2 levels at a time so we can kind of go over how spells change with this character and how we're picking our invocations. So at level 3 we're going to be picking our Pact Boon. Now the choice I had made with this character, and a choice I probably would still make, is Pact of the Chain, though I look at Pact of the Talisman and I could see it working reasonably well as well. Now my issue with taking either Pact of the Blade or Pact of the Tome is both of those pact choices are invocation heavy. Pact of the Chain is actually good even if you don't take invocations specifically to boost it, and this character is invocation hungry. So what I would normally do with this is I'm going to assume that whatever familiar I have, there's some kind of aberrant mind, and they're going to be taking a form that mechanically is probably going to work something like an imp, but it's probably more of an alien presence, tiny with slime and tentacles flying around. I'd also occasionally have it take its spider form, and it'd crawl across my face and I wouldn't seem to notice. The goal here is creep everybody out. For my ability score improvement, I'm going to do something that I normally don't do, and that is increase my primary ability score first. So we're going to increase our charisma here. This does a lot of things for us. The most obvious is it's going to help us in combat. It's going to increase our hit roll and our damage with our Eldritch Blast. Now because we chose the Pact of the Chain, if we were to have our familiar give us the help action in combat, we could probably pretty easily maintain effective damage in combat even without increasing our charisma, but when we increase our charisma as well, it does so even more. And frankly, usually our familiar is going to have other things to do than give us our help action with our Eldritch Blast. The other thing charisma is going to do for us is it is going to improve our deception skill, our social skills. It's going to make it harder for other creatures to determine that we're in a disguise. So it is going to push forward the concept of the character. At 4th level, we're going to get an additional cantrip, and the cantrip you want here is Friends. Friends gives us advantage on all charisma checks directed at the creature we cast it on. And this works so well with this character concept, because remember that we're not repeating our appearance, our voice, our name, our mannerisms, anything. So we can use the Friends cantrip with abandon. And the Friends cantrip, when the spell ends, the creature realizes that you use magic to influence its mood and it becomes hostile towards you. But here's where I would say becomes hostile towards whom? That strange looking lizard man who was hanging around when he last had a conversation with him? Because that lizard man doesn't exist anymore and never will exist again. So we basically are exploiting a loophole in the Friends cantrip. Because we can constantly use Disguise Self, and because we are using it, and because we have the actor feat, which prevents people from recognizing us through our voice or even our mannerisms, we have an amazing deception skill. Friends is going to be something that basically has no downside. The one thing you do have to remember, though, is whatever your interaction is, you have to complete it within a minute, because if you don't, then they'll become hostile to you right then. For 2nd level spells on this character, I like Mirror Image, Misty Step, and Phantasmal Force. At this point, I'm going to keep my 1st level spells as well, though I might change out Dissonant Whispers here soon. I think at this point it's still a pretty good spell to have, But Mirror Image, Misty Step, Phantasmal Force are all great spells for this character. Mirror Image because, number one, remember, we don't have a great defense with this character. Our armor class isn't particularly high. Mirror Image is something that can alleviate that. Misty Step is our first teleport. Teleports are just useful. They're useful to any character, this one included. Misty Step, as I talked about in previous weeks when I was talking about spell selection for Warlocks, I mentioned that Misty Step was something we might consider taking at 3rd level, probably keep to 4th level, but at 5th level we definitely want to switch this out. And then Phantasmal Force is the kind of spell which, number one, can be super effective depending on your DM. Talk to your DM first, but I think that in a lot of campaigns, Phantasmal Force is super effective, and it fits the theme of this character. The bunch of inky tentacles wrapping around a creature. This is the kind of phantasmal force that this character would cast, the whole time them hearing those voices in their head.
Remembering the broken inferiority of another fear near the pyramid, I prostrate myself before the anomaly of the death out of the color that stood before me.
So we're going to pop ahead to 6th level. We get to pick another Eldritch Invocation at this point, and at this point we are going to take Misty Visions. Misty Visions allows us to cast Silent Image at will, without expending a spell slot or material components. And remember, Mask of Many Faces does not use concentration, neither does Minor Illusion, so we can combine the ability to disguise ourselves, the ability to create an image, maybe even of ourselves or another character, and we can use our Minor Illusion to give it voice. The king might walk into the room and say, "The intruders are here, get them." And then the king walks into the room again and says, "No, he's the intruder, get him." And then the king walks into the room a 3rd time. "No, they're the intruders, get them." This character can do that. And it's just a lot of fun. Again, this works better in a campaign where there is significant non-combat challenges, especially if social interaction is part of it. At 6th level, we get Entropic Ward. When a creature makes an attack roll against us, we can impose disadvantage, and if it misses us, we get advantage on our next roll. It's not a super powerful ability, but being that we don't have a particularly strong defense, we haven't really built this character around defense, getting a defensive ability is significant for this character. Now by level 6, I'll say that we probably don't want Dissonant Whispers anymore. At this point, we probably don't want Misty Step anymore. We're going to be able to choose 4 3rd level spells, and this is where we're going to be spending our pack slots most of the time. Number 1, Hypnotic Pattern is massive. One of the best 3rd level spells in the game. Now I will say that if you wanted to choose Fear, I think it would also work well for this concept. I actually think both of them work perfectly well for this concept, because this is a character that affects the minds and perceptions of others. The second spell I'm taking is Thunderstep. This is going to replace Misty Step. The next spell we're going to take, this one's really important for this character, is Tongues. Tongues does not use your concentration, and it lasts an hour. Remember that the actor feat requires that we observe people or creatures we want to imitate for at least a minute. This is very good, because we can cast Tongues, we can interact for that minute, we still have 59 minutes where we can perfectly imitate whoever we interacted with. And we can also imitate their language. In our final spell slot, we're going to pick Counterspell. Counterspell is a spell that I don't cast all that often, to be honest, but when you need it, you really need it, and it makes a huge difference in combat. Now remember, although we are building this character primarily for utility, for illusions, for controlling others, in combat we can still do just an Eldritch Blast and do decent damage. We're doing +7 to hit, d10 +4 damage, twice on our turn, if that's what we choose to do. Throw on the Hex spell, get another d6. And there is nothing wrong with that damage. It's not great damage. We can build characters that do more damage than this. But this damage is perfectly fine. We are definitely out-damaging characters that are not built for doing damage in combat. And in combat, we are going to feel relevant. And if Eldritch Blast is all we do in combat, fine. We're still going to be useful to our party. But because we have added spells like Counterspell, like Hypnotic Pattern, we can be effective controllers as well. Now, as we go up in level, it is important to remember that our pack slots are never increasing. Not until we get to a level 11 are our pack slots increasing. So we still only have 2 spells per short rest. They go very, very fast. So don't go in thinking that you can do Hypnotic Pattern in every combat. You're not going to be able to. But as a once in a while thing, we've got it. Most of the time in combat, we're an Eldritch Blaster. But think about ways to use the things that are not using our pack slots, like using Silent Image. Silent Image can be effective in combat, creating potential targets for enemies, creating obscurement for allies. Silent Image can be effective in combat, so don't be afraid to use it. Because Eldritch Blasting every round, every combat is boring. This character has no limit to the amount of times they can cast Silent Image. Use it. And there are other ways to have fun here. Remember that the enemies are hearing in their mind.
At long last, the vile color of the Bohemian, its so-called surface revealed, took no blasphemous priest to make me seldom befriend an orc around the fraction.
And by the way, there's a website you can go to. It's called Random HP Lovecraft Story Generator. It is a great way to come up with nonsense that has a foreboding tone to it that your character can use just whenever they need to give somebody a voice in their head. So at level 8, we're going to get another Eldritch Invocation. And at this level, I would suggest taking Voice of the Chainmaster. This is going to allow us to telepathically communicate with our familiar at any distance and perceive through its senses at any distance, and allow us to speak through our familiar using our voice. Remember, our familiar is probably going to be invisible all the time. This works well with this concept. Once again, I remind you of the actor feat, which requires us to observe somebody for a minute in order to be able to imitate them. We can use our Pact of the Chain feature of Voice of the Chainmaster to send in an invisible familiar as far away as we want, and that could give us the ability to observe that creature or person that we want to imitate. The utility uses of Voice of the Chainmaster are so exhaustive I couldn't possibly go over them in a video. It is an excellent invocation. And with our ability score improvement, I'm going to max out my charisma. It's going to keep me relevant in combat. It is also going to improve the abilities that this character is focused on. So at 8th level, I can no longer justify keeping Mirror Image, and I'd probably even get rid of Phantasmal Force at this point. I just can't see spending a 4th level slot on a 2nd level spell that doesn't scale. That's going to give us 4 different 4th level slots we can pick. Now for me, number 1, there is no question. Everd's Black Tentacles. And I get this through the Great Old One patron, and it is a great choice for me, thematically and mechanically. Everd's Black Tentacles is a great battlefield control spell. It's going to restrain enemies, it's going to restrict movement, and it's going to do damage. It's going to do it all with inky black tentacles. Perfect. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of Thunderstep, and I'm going to replace it with Dimension Door. Dimension Door is a better spell than Thunderstep in almost every way. It doesn't do damage to the creatures left behind, and I consider that kind of a minor feature of Thunderstep anyways. Dimension Door just increases our range, removes the requirement to see where we're teleporting to. It is just a better teleportation spell. It's a really good one. Good enough that I'm going to keep it. I'm never going to replace Dimension Door. Third spell I'm going to take is Charm Monster. Not a spell I normally take, but thematically I think it works for this build, especially when we consider that this is a character that infiltrates. This might give us the ability to use something like a Charm Monster outside of combat, and outside of combat is where you want to cast this kind of spell. Also, remember that the creature knows it's charmed by you after the duration expires. But charmed by you? Charmed by who? Then I'm taking Banishment, a pretty effective combat spell, and it is going to scale really well, so we're going to keep it so that once we get to 9th level, we're going to be able to banish 2 creatures. And a lot of our spells right now are concentrating on wisdom saves, so it's nice to bring one in that has a charisma save instead, and it just keeps some options open for us in combats. We're going to finish off with Summon Greater Demon. Now, I've talked about this spell a lot, but one thing I'll mention with Warlocks is this does something that is different than what we're normally doing. So we can keep blasting away with Eldritch Blast while this crazy demon that we've got on the other side of the enemies is tearing them apart. Now be aware, the demon is going to eventually make its saving throw, and it's going to break your control of it, which means that it'll attack you if it gets a chance. But if it is on the other side of the enemies, it's going to attack them first. It's also a spell that works well with infiltration. You infiltrate somewhere, you summon a greater demon, and you walk away. So bringing this character to 10th level, we are going to take Devil's Sight with this character. One of the things we've been missing with this character is Dark Vision, so Devil's Sight will allow us to essentially replicate Dark Vision. In fact, in pure darkness, Devil's Sight is better than Dark Vision. It also allows us to see through magical darkness. Now, to some degree, we could emulate a Devil's Sight before, because we could potentially see through our familiar's eyes, and if it's take the imp form, we could potentially at least navigate through darkness. But if we're talking about actually in combat, then in order to be effective in that darkness, we're going to need Devil's Sight. The other thing we're getting at level 10 is Thought Shield. Starting at 10th level, your thoughts can't be read telepathically or by other means unless you allow it. You have resistance to psychic damage, and whenever a creature deals psychic damage to us, they take the same amount that we do. This isn't a super powerful ability, but I will say that thematically, again, it is a good ability for us. Our character not being able to be infiltrated by telepathy is actually something that works well with this character. Now we're going to get one more cantrip, and I think the Mage Hand cantrip works perfectly well here. Though if Tasha's is available, I would consider Mind Sliver, just because I like the ability to reduce the saving throw that the creature is going to be making before the end of your next turn. Now at this point, I'm probably going to get rid of the Charm Monster spell just because I want another slot with my 5th level slots, but pick up Charm Monster again later. Because right now what I want is, number one, I want Synaptic Static. Synaptic Static is a wide area blast, does okay damage, but it also targets intelligence, and creatures that fail are going to have a d6 penalty on future checks, mainly their attack rolls, and this is something that works a lot more often than it doesn't work. Second thing I'm going to take is Telekinesis. Remember that this character really has focused on building the charisma up to 20. That 20 charisma is going to help the telekinesis spell and make it more effective, and telekinesis is a great thing to concentrate on. We can restrain enemies with it, we can pick up enemies and throw them over the bridge or over the wall. It has combat implications, it has utility uses, and it lasts for up to 10 minutes, so that's a pretty good duration as well. So once we get to level 12, we're going to get another Eldritch Invocation, and what we're going to do here, we're actually going to take one that is going to improve our Eldritch Blast. Repelling Blast is an invocation we could have taken right at 2nd level. It's just that this particular concept is very invocation hungry. So Repelling Blast just had to wait until we got to 12th level. The nice thing is Repelling Blast gets better as we go up in levels. And when we are 12th level, we have those 3 shots with our Eldritch Blast. And whenever we hit a creature with an Eldritch Blast, we can push it up to 10 feet away from us in a straight line. This could be 3 different creatures at this level. Then we're choosing a 6th level spell. This is an easy choice. We're going to take Mass Suggestion. Again, something that fits the concept of this character. It is also a super effective spell that doesn't use concentration, lasts a long time, requires a single action to cast, and affects many different creatures with no friendly fire. Then we're going to take our ability score improvement, and we're finally going to take a feat. And we're getting to high level here. It's about time we picked up Resilient Constitution, because Resilient Constitution is one of those feats that gets better with level. At 12th level, we are at a +4 bonus. It's going to be +5 in one more level at 13th level. These are big bonuses. We're going to get one more known spell, and we're going to go back and pick up Charm Monster again. Now remember, 11th level is a big level for Warlocks. And the reason 11th level is really big is number one, we're going to get our first Mystic Arcanum, which is going to be Mass Suggestion. We're going to cast it every single day. It's one more spell we're going to get every day, and it's a great one. But in addition, our pack slots finally go from 2 to 3. That means we can now cast 3 pack spells per short rest. And the spells we're casting are all high level. 5th level slots or 6th level slot. So we're going to get our Mystic Arcanum of 7th level, and this is, again, just a super easy choice. Force Cage, it's not a thematic choice for this character, it's just a great, great spell that just wins combats. This character can still deliver effective damage in combat, but it can do a lot more than effective damage in combat now. The control aspects of this character are quite strong, and Force Cage is basically one combat a day that you're going to use one action and you're going to win it for the party. And at 14th level we get Create Thrall. This allows us to infect the humanoid's mind with the alien magic of our patron. We can use our action to touch an incapacitated humanoid. Once again, this works best with campaigns that have a lot of stuff that's happening outside of combat. Our character is an infiltrator. Can we get to the king and touch them while they're sleeping? Good chance. With no save then, that creature is charmed by us. And that lasts as long as we want. We can also communicate telepathically with it at any range, and it's two-way. Now, I think it's important to mention that the charmed condition does not mean you control the creature. That's not what the charm condition does. Charm condition means it can't attack you. Charm condition means you get advantage on social checks with that creature, and that's really all the charm condition does. But a lot of DMs will play Create Thrall in a way that allows you some control of that creature because it kind of fits the concept of the ability, so that's going to depend on your DM. But even if it's played just by the rules as written, for this character this is a very appropriate ability. And we're going to get another Pact Magic selection, and here I'm thinking our choice is Fly. Because we'll always be casting it with a 5th level slot, it's not just Fly for us, it's Fly for 3 different people. Fly, remember, has a great movement speed, it's a good utility spell, and it also can be a good combat spell. That brings us to level 16, and we're going to select a new Eldritch Invocation, and this one, easy choice for me. Visions of Distant Realms, going to give us Arcane Eye at will. Yes, please. Arcane Eye is a great spell. Being able to cast it at will is insane, and again, this is a character that gets advantage from being able to observe other creatures. Arcane Eye is a great way to do that without any danger. We're going to get our 8th level Mystic Arcanum for this character. And I think what we're going to choose is Demiplane. Now, when we have an infiltration character, I actually really like Demiplane because sometimes you want the rest of your party to be able to infiltrate as well. So the rest of the party go into the Demiplane. The next day you infiltrate. Once you get in, you cast Demiplane and the rest of the party comes out, right? So this is a really good spell for this concept of character, especially this concept of character that works with the party. We don't want to be the kind of character that steals all the action from the party, and Demiplane is a way we can help get them involved. For our ability score improvement, we're finally going to do it. We are finally going to get Moderately Armored. That is going to give us proficiency with medium armor and shields. We can finally get our armor class to a decent level. Grab yourself half plate, grab yourself a shield, or if you want to keep your stealth, get a breastplate and a shield. We're also going to increase our dexterity score by 1. That's not going to help us right now, but we can eventually get some use out of that. We're going to pick another known spell. Again, we're talking Pact Magic. So we have so many Pact Magic spells. It's okay to pick stuff that's totally circumstantial. Dream is one of those spells. And read Dream, tell me it is not perfect for this character. What kind of character is going to create nightmares? A great old one patron Warlock. So let's just jump to level 20 here. Not a huge amount happens after level 17, but I'll kind of go over the way I would do it. First off, at level 15, we're going to get another Eldritch Invocation. And I think I'm just going to give myself a luxury pick here and take Grasp of Hadar. So a repelling blast allows us to send a creature back 10 feet if we hit it with an Eldritch Blast. Grasp of Vidar allows us to pull it 10 feet if we hit it with an Eldritch Blast. And so we just get a little bit more versatility in the control of our Eldritch Blast. The thing to remember about Grasp of Vidar that doesn't affect Repelling Blast is that it is limited to once on our turn, so we can't do it to multiple creatures. But that doesn't mean we can't combine it with Repelling Blast. We might push some creatures and pull other ones. Then we're going to get our 9th level Mystic Arcanum. This comes at 17th level. And I am going to choose Foresight for this character for reasons I mentioned in my spells video. Then we're going to get a final ability score improvement, and we are going to do an ability score improvement. And what we're going to improve is our dexterity and our constitution. And the reason we're going to do that is because moderately armored increased our dexterity by 1, and resilient constitution increased our constitution by 1. So they're both currently sitting at 17, so we can increase them both to 18. And it is worthwhile to do so, because our constitution score, remember, by going to a new even number, it's going to give us additional hit points equal to our level. It's also going to increase our constitution saves by 1. And with our dexterity, it is improving our initiative. It is also improving our dexterity saves by 1. At 20th level, we get Eldritch Master. This allows us to draw on our inner reserve of mystical power, allowing us, basically, we spend 1 minute and we can get all our pack slots back once a day. We're going to add 2 more known spells to our pack slots. And remember, we have all the packed magic we need. We should be picking spells that are just going to be super circumstantial, because there's no regularly useful spells that are going to replace our current regularly useful spells. Something like a Contact Other Plane I could see. And something like a Hallucinatory Terrain I could see. And that is our 20th level character. So we're going to end up with a Constitution modifier for Constitution saves of +10. So that means that our concentration is pretty safe. Wisdom save of +5, Dexterity save of +4. Those aren't super high numbers, but they're not terrible numbers either. So our saving throws are actually fairly solid. Now, assuming we're going to get half plate and a shield, we can expect our armor class to be at 19, not 15. Initiative at +4, 183 hit points at 20th level is pretty good. And in combat, we are perfectly effective. We were going to have 4 Eldritch Blasts around, each +11 to hit, d10 +5 damage. Of course, by 20th level, we probably have something like a Rod of the Packkeeper that's going to improve those numbers. So if doing damage is what you want to do at this point, Eldritch Blast works perfectly fine. But at this point, we actually have a fair number of spells. We have 4 Mystic Arcanum. We have 4 pack slots that come back every short rest. They're all 5th level slots, and we can do it in additional time. So if we have even 1 short rest, that will be 12 5th level slots in 1 day. And remember, if we cast Foresight on ourselves, we can Eldritch Blast with advantage all day long, and there's no concentration. So that's the Voice from Beyond. Let me know what you think about it in the comments down below. If I was going to do this post Tasha's, what would I change? Well, not necessarily anything. I think this works perfectly well post Tasha's. But I do think that there are some additional options we might consider that I went over. I might take Pact of the Talisman. I'd at least consider it. I might take a custom lineage. In fact, I probably would if it was available. But I don't think it makes a huge difference. I think choosing the selections that don't involve Tasha's at all work perfectly well for this concept. So that said, I only have 2 more things to say. The first is, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. And the second is,
remembering the broken inferiority of another fear near the pyramid, I prostrate myself before the anomaly of the death out of the color that stood before me. They eagerly secreted away the awful knowledge of the lantern, some furtive, but others accurately or frantically explored in a book. A secret beyond another abnormality indicates that a source devoured the tattered spider. Some bargain over a fire was paternal. A foreign tome hated the wisely inconceivable hellish echo. Like a tale of yesteryear living inside some creature was hypnotic. A shadow towards some servant unleashed its power upon a source Remembering the incinerated spirit of the octopus, I prostrated myself before a wheel of a case behind the knowledge that stood before me. At long last, the broken tome of the frustrating, accidentally earth-threatening myth was revealed. The darkness about to mark eagerly cooked and ate the flesh of the ritual. At long last, the vile color of the bohemian, its so-called surface revealed, took no blasphemous priest to make me seldom befriend an orc around the fraction. But the insidious voice was typical. A cylindrical nightmare reached in an understanding with the proverbial polygon. The frozen note, barely hypnotic. The ocean, underhandedly sucking the life from an abyss over the sky. A careless researcher reaching an understanding with an otherworldly vapor, single-handedly learning to scream. The tomb greedily planned an escape from an insanity behind the ring. You watch in horror, like an accurately forming unfamiliar with the ocean. You hesitantly dance with the brain, but others secreted away from the awful knowledge of a forgotten spirit. Remembering the opulent symmetry of a putrid rock, you prostrate yourself before the horror of a symbol that stood before you. It existed inside a speech of dreams. Oh, the earth-threatening annihilation of it all. The soil from the symbol of a memory, because the torch from the transformation cleared the stone. The egg of blackness, the vapor hesitates. Like a treacherous lover, they frantically cooked and ate the flesh of some lazy outer. Yet most people believe that a cloud formation operated for centuries without the true knowledge of the whole. But a modern secret is much more unspeakable. A creature beyond a delicacy, cleaned in the vacuum of the bulb. An anomaly beyond insanity traded by an outer beam.